So we come to our reading, and that's John chapter 21 from verse 18, continuation from last week. And Jesus is talking to Peter. He says, "Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, "Lord, who is going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he asked, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus answered, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." Now, because of this, a rumour spread among the believers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say he would not die. He only said, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you?" This is a disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. Jesus did many other things as well. If everyone were written down, I suppose even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So Jesus talking to Peter, and Peter's received the good news we heard about last week. He's been reinstated as the leader. Jesus has set him as being the shepherd over his church. And now comes some other news. Peter's death will not be a timely death. Other people will dress him. Other people will take him where he does not want to go. And that spells to me that it may be death by something like crucifixion, which our Lord had. And for Peter, that probably made him feel a bit crestfallen, and he's not too happy with that. And he sees the disciple whom Jesus loved, and that's probably John the writer of the Gospel, who's following them. And he says, "Lord, what about him? What about him? If that's my path, what's going to be his path?" And Jesus says, "That's none of your business," basically. Jesus says, "If I want him to remain here until I die, then what's that to you? Why is that your concern?" I think it's saying to us that often we can be too concerned about those around us. Especially when we're going through difficult times. We can look at somebody else and think they're so blessed. Life is so straightforward for them. And we can be envious of them. And that's not right. God gives each one of us a path to walk. Each one of us people to care for, situations to work in, things to resolve. And we shouldn't be looking at somebody else saying, "I wish I had their path." Because God has given us our path. And our blessings. And I think alongside that, I think that we often, when we meet with people, we put on our best front, that all is well. And when we see other people, we need to remind ourselves of that. This is what the front they want us to see. When they get home, things may be very different. So don't be envious of the path other people have to walk. But I think also, as well as saying, "Don't be bothered about him, Peter," Jesus says, "Follow me." And that is important because for Peter, following Jesus is the way forward. Not trying to be like someone else or thinking about somebody else. Jesus has said, "Be a shepherd to my people." And Jesus is the good shepherd to follow. And therefore Peter needs to keep his eyes on Jesus and be like Jesus. And then there's a couple of strange verses to finish up with. And it's basically about Jesus. There's not enough books that could be written about him that the world could contain. So much can be said about him. And I think there's two things there. I think the first is that as people, we are so complex, so full of character, we can't be pinned down by just words on a page. No matter how much we try and write, there is always more to us than what we can put on paper. And that is so true with Jesus. The whole thing about Jesus being human and yet divine, that cannot be explained on sheets of paper. We just accept it by faith. There you are, proof I'm in their church. But anyway, there's just more to Jesus than can be put on paper. And we can find that. We can find it in our worship, in our prayers, in our Bible reading, and that's how we connect with the person. And as we feel that Jesus is answering our prayers, as we feel him close to us at times of need, as we look back and see where Jesus has been in our lives, then so our relationship with him will grow. But I think also that when John says there isn't enough room in the world to contain all the books that could be written, he's saying this gospel message that we have, the message about God's love, will never be contained by the world in which we live. It is too challenging. It's too revolutionary for the world in which we live. And the world will not receive it. Some people will. But the world as a whole does not receive God's love. And I think there are times when people do come close to that. And as we thought about before, things like weddings and baptisms and funerals, there are times when it's like there's an opening for God to come into people's lives and to meet them in the joy or to meet with them in the sorrow. And that's when often people pray and give thanks to God or pray for his help and find that God is faithful to them. But we know that the message of the good news of God's love in Jesus is not something the world is ready to receive. There are some people within it will. But the day will come when Jesus will return. And the day will come when the whole world in its entirety will see him in his glory and in his majesty. And we look forward to that day, just as John, the writer of that gospel, looked forward to that day. Let's just pray. Lord Jesus, give us eyes to follow you more nearly, not to look to those around us. And give us that hope in our hearts, Lord, that one day we will see you face to face. And Lord, help us through the lives that we lead, through the things we say and do, to draw more people into your kingdom, to know your love. For we ask it in your name. Amen.